One autumn day in October 2013, young Abigail Hernandez finished her classes and set off from school to go home. The girl had dreams, plans for the future, and her whole life ahead of her, but as evening fell and the shadows grew longer, Abigail did not return. Her mother's calls went unanswered, and worry quickly turned to fear. What began as an ordinary day turned into the most terrible nightmare for her parents. Their daughter, as it turned out, had vanished without a trace. The search for Abigail became a string of questions without answers, keeping the community on edge as everyone tried to solve the mystery of what had really happened to the girl that day. Every parent, wanting to protect their child, explains that you should not trust strangers, talk to them, let alone agree to go somewhere or get into their car. Such conversations are just as important as explaining the reasons for these safety measures and the possible consequences of not following them. The story of American schoolgirl Abigail Hernandez became a stark example of what can happen if you let your guard down for even a moment and trust a person who seems friendly and ready to help. She hoped that the kind stranger would simply give her a ride home, but instead found herself in the clutches of a real monster. Abigail Maria Hernandez, better known as Abby, was born on October 12, 1998 in the city of Manchester, New Hampshire. She was the younger daughter of Ruben and Xenia Hernandez, growing up alongside her older sister Sarah, with whom she had a close relationship. Abby's mother worked as a nurse at a local hospital, while her father was involved in trade. The Hernandez family was filled with warmth and well-being, but during the period when Abby was a teenager, her parents decided to divorce. After this, her father remarried and started a new family, while both daughters remained living with their mother. From early childhood, Abby showed herself to be an active and sociable child, always surrounded by friends, easily captivated by new hobbies and enthusiastically mastering them. She loved sports, drew well, was engaged in photography, read a lot and studied foreign languages, which came easily to her. Around the age of 12, Abby joined a hiking club and began going on overnight hikes and rock climbing. The girl fell in love with the mountains and learned to apply wilderness survival skills in practice. And this is not surprising, because the picturesque landscapes of New Hampshire with forests, rivers, and mountains created ideal conditions for tourism and adventures, attracting extreme sports enthusiasts from all over the country. The summer of 2013 turned out to be eventful for Abby. In September, returning to school, the girl enthusiastically shared with friends memories of summer adventures, places she had visited, and new achievements. At that time, 14-year-old Abby had struck up a romantic relationship with Jimmy, a student at her school who was a year older. Xenia knew that her daughter was dating this boy and did not object to their communication. In early October 2013, when the autumn holidays and Abby's 15th birthday were just around the corner, she enthusiastically planned a hike in the mountains with members of the hiking club she belonged to. For her birthday, the girl received new hiking boots as a gift, which were a bit tight, so she decided to break them in by wearing them to school. On October 9th, Abby set off for class as usual. After lessons, she planned to take a walk in the park and promised her mother not to be late. But when her daughter did not return home by 5 in the evening, Xenia called her, but the cell phone was turned off. Her mother began to worry, but assumed that perhaps her daughter's phone had died and she had lingered with friends. After a few hours of not receiving any news, Xenia panicked. She called her daughter's friends and teachers, trying to find out when Abby had left school and who she might have gone with. She was told that the girl had left immediately after classes, saying goodbye to her friends at the bus stop where they were boarding the school bus, while Abby herself decided to walk home. Abby had not stopped by any of her friends and had not called anyone, not even Jimmy, whom she had planned to meet. Frightened, Xenia, taking her eldest daughter Sarah with her, immediately went to the police station and reported the disappearance. Since Abby was a minor, the search began immediately. It was established that the signal from her phone disappeared approximately 1.5 kilometers from the house. News of the schoolgirl's disappearance quickly spread through social networks. Flyers were printed with her photo, a description of her clothing and a phone number to contact in case any information appeared. The next morning, a story about the disappearance appeared on the evening news with a call for help. The search for Abby united hundreds of police officers, volunteers, and local residents who combed parks, wastelands, reservoirs and abandoned buildings. The police worked out various versions, looked for witnesses and conducted interviews with the girl's relatives and friends, but to no avail. Detectives tried to find out if Abby had enemies, detractors, or perhaps overly persistent admirers. But those who knew her claimed that the girl had always been friendly, sociable and a favorite of the company. She had no conflicts with others, and none of her friends noticed that anyone was following her or trying to harm her. The first person the detectives interrogated was Jimmy, Abby's boyfriend, who immediately became a suspect. They tried to understand if there had been any conflicts or grievances between them that could have been a motive for causing harm. But Jimmy was shocked and did not understand why he was suspected. He sincerely could not believe that anyone would assume that he wished to harm his beloved girlfriend. Jimmy had an ironclad alibi for the time of Abby's disappearance, which was confirmed by his family, teachers and friends. His day was scheduled by the minute: classes, training, rehearsal for the school band, and celebrating his grandfather's birthday, which he did not miss. Jimmy willingly cooperated with the investigation, telling the police everything he knew, but this did not help advance the investigation in any way. The schoolgirl seemed to have vanished into thin air. For a long time no clues or even hints were found as to which direction to move in. The detectives understood that the chances of finding her alive were approaching zero, but the girl's relatives did not lose hope. About a month and a half after Abby's disappearance, her mother found a strange letter in her mailbox. The author of the message was her missing daughter. In this letter, the girl apologized for her actions, assured that she was all right, healthy and safe. She wrote that she loved her mom and Sarah, but could not reveal where she was now. At the end of the message there was a cryptic and ambiguous phrase, "Dreams come true." A graphological examination conducted later confirmed the authenticity of the letter. The text was indeed written in Abby's handwriting, and it was dated November 1st. This indicated that the girl was most likely alive. However, her whereabouts and the real reasons for her disappearance remained a mystery. Why could she not report where she was? Perhaps she feared something or someone, or maybe she had been forced to write this message. Soon a version emerged that Abby had left home voluntarily, but after seeing reports about her disappearance, she decided to let her family know that she was okay. One hypothesis was that the girl had become pregnant and decided to run away with the father of her future child, fearing condemnation from loved ones. However, this theory only caused bewilderment in the Hernandez family. Sarah confidently stated that if her younger sister had really been expecting a child, she would have been the first to know about it, because there had never been any secrets between them. Moreover, Abby's only boyfriend was Jimmy, and according to his own words, he and Abby had not yet been intimate, both remained virgins. The missing girl's friends also confirmed that Abby had not dated anyone other than Jimmy and had never mentioned any other infatuations. Her best friend Miranda insisted that Abby could not have gotten pregnant under any circumstances and would not have abandoned her family, especially her mother and older sister. Besides, all her documents, personal belongings and valuables had been left at home. Investigators carefully studied the letter, hoping to find at least some clues or hints that could indicate the girl's whereabouts. But no encrypted messages or pleas for help were found there. Nevertheless, the case interested the FBI, which classified it as an abduction. It was suggested that Abby was being held by force, and that she wrote the letter under dictation, having no way to report where she was. And this turned out to be an accurate guess. The kidnapper and his victim were only a few dozen kilometers from the Hernandez home. Moreover, the police had visited the offender's home several times since Abby's disappearance, but had not noticed anything suspicious. The kidnapper himself felt cornered and was desperately trying to decide what to do with the captive next. Who is Nathaniel Kibby? It's time to tell about the identity of the kidnapper. Nathaniel, or simply Nate Kibby, was born on July 15, 1980 in the same city as Abby. There is little information about his family, but according to some reports, his mother raised him alone, and he never knew his biological father. In his school years, Nate was known as a real bully and troublemaker. He constantly got into fights and conflicted with those around him. He even had a list of people he wanted to harm or beat up. From an early age, he exhibited aggressive cruelty, which made his peers try to stay away from him, and teachers could not handle him. As a teenager, Kibby repeatedly came to the attention of the police due to various offenses. He was a member of a gang and was proud of this fact, feeling a special passion for firearms, which he knew quite well. The young man had many charges for fights that led to serious bodily injury, illegal possession of prohibited substances, and petty thefts. However, he always managed to get off with administrative penalties. Interestingly, Nate attended the same school as Abby, but given the 18-year age difference, their paths never crossed either within the walls of the educational institution or outside of it. After graduating from school, Nate Kibby seemed to have come to his senses and decided to move away from the criminal life. He got a job at one of the local enterprises, and colleagues and management generally spoke positively about him. But after a couple of years, following a serious conflict that ended in property damage, he quit, moved to the suburbs and settled in a disadvantaged area, in a trailer park. Neighbors considered him strange and tried to avoid communicating with this gloomy and aggressive man. In 2011, when Kibby was already over 30, he began dating a 13-year-old girl with whom he actually lived together. She came from a troubled family, ran away from home and settled in Kibby's trailer. He didn't even hide their relationship, introducing the schoolgirl as his girlfriend. Strangely, these events passed without consequences for him. In the spring of 2013, Nate Kibby first tried to kidnap a person, but fortunately his plan fell through. He attacked a 15-year-old schoolgirl at a bus stop near the educational institution and tried to forcibly drag her into the car. She desperately resisted, screamed and called for help. Passers-by came running to the noise, and the attacker hastily fled the scene. Despite the testimony of the victim and witnesses, the case was soon closed and did not go to court. No one perceived Kibby as a real threat. And now let's return to the day of Abby's disappearance, October 9, 2013. On the eve of her 15th birthday, she received new hiking boots as a gift, which turned out to be a little too tight. Abby decided to break in the shoes by wearing them to school. After classes, her feet began to hurt a lot, but the girl still decided to walk home. Each step was agony for her, and she still had about 1.5 kilometers to go to get home. At that moment, an old pickup truck stopped next to her, driven by Nathaniel. The smiling man offered to give her a ride anywhere, but Abby refused. However, the stranger did not give up and slowly drove alongside, not leaving her alone. Nate noticed that the girl was limping and asked what had happened. Abby sighed and admitted that her new shoes had rubbed her foot. Hearing this, Kibby opened the passenger side door and gestured for her to get in. She hesitated, but eventually agreed. Abby thought that this friendly man could not pose a danger, but she was very wrong. During the ride, Nate struck up a casual conversation, trying to lull her vigilance, which he did splendidly. Abby felt safe, answering his questions and laughing at his jokes. At some point, Kibby said that he needed to stop by a hardware store for repair materials. When they drove into a dark parking lot, Abby became noticeably nervous. She said that her house was very close and she could easily get there on foot. But, catching a sinister look from the driver, the schoolgirl decided to try to unbuckle her seatbelt and jump out of the car. Nate, anticipating her intention, managed to grab her by the clothes with one hand, and with the other quickly pulled out a gun from the glove compartment. He pointed the weapon directly at the frightened girl's face and threatened to kill her if she tried to resist. After that, the kidnapper tied her hands and feet with a cable tie. He put a balaclava on her head so that she could not see the road and understand where she was being taken. But soon he noticed that Abby had slightly shifted the headgear to see what was happening. This enraged him, and he used a stun gun, shocking Abby, causing her to lose consciousness. Abby came to in a cramped and stuffy room with no windows. As it turned out later, it was a small shipping container that belonged to Nathaniel and stood in the trailer park, a little apart, among thick thickets. Soon the kidnapper himself appeared, holding a roll of duct tape and a motorcycle helmet in his hand. He taped her mouth and eyes, then pulled the helmet over her head. Making sure that the victim was completely immobilized and helpless, he tore off her clothes. From that time on, Nate almost every day, fulfilling his most perverse fantasies. In addition to physical violence, he also resorted to psychological pressure. He threatened to deal with her family if she tried to escape or call for help. At the same time, he promised to let her go if she behaved quietly and did not create problems. The first days of captivity, Abby was in a state of shock, saying goodbye to life. But later she realized that they were not going to kill her yet. Then the girl decided to try to establish emotional contact with the kidnapper in order to convince him to let her go. She tried to convey to him that he would be convicted, that everyone can make a mistake, and that she would not go to the police if he let her go. But Nate was extremely unpredictable. Any little thing could cause him to fly into a rage, turning him into a real monster. Sometimes he showed something like tenderness towards the captive, but more often he was cruel, resorting to moral and physical violence. The container where Nate kept Abby was well soundproofed, so no one heard her screams. After about a month, the kidnapper began to take her to his trailer, allowed her to take a shower and even watch TV with him. It was from the news that they learned about the large-scale search for the missing girl. Then Kibby had the idea to force her to write a letter to her mother to convince the family that she was all right and to curtail the search operation. Abby wrote several letters at Kibby's dictation, each time trying to leave a hint about her whereabouts. But the man noticed these attempts and punished her severely. In the end, she wrote the letter as he demanded, in order to avoid even more. After about 6 months, Nathaniel began to trust Abby so much that he allowed her to help him make counterfeit money. Sometimes he let her spend the night in the trailer and even entrusted her with cooking food. Despite this trust, he continued to be cruel, subjecting her to violence, forcing her to be. He made her call him master and never revealed his real name. Gradually, Abby managed to establish at least some mutual understanding with him. One time, Nate even agreed to bring books and magazines. On one page, the girl saw a name, Nathaniel Kibby, but she was not sure that it was his real name. She decided to take a risk. Once she addressed him by name, waiting for a reaction. To her surprise, he just rolled his eyes, sighed, and calmly asked where she had learned his name. Abby honestly replied that she had seen it in a book. The man just smiled, saying nothing. Since Abby spent most of her time in a soundproofed container, she did not hear what was happening outside. She did not know that one time the police walked just a few meters from her, having arrived for a completely different reason. The fact is that Nate, once again violating the law, decided to cooperate with the investigation and confessed to illegally storing weapons. They came to search him, inspected the trailer, but did not approach the containers. It did not even occur to anyone to look there. Thanks to his cooperation with the police, Kibby got off with only a fine and confiscation of weapons. It seemed incredible, but after all his misdeeds, he was never brought to court. It appeared that luck was always on his side, and he himself seemed to have believed in his own impunity. He was not planning to let Abby go, but perhaps she was beginning to bore him. In July 2014, Nathaniel met a woman named Lorraine at a bar. After a short conversation, he invited her to his trailer, where they were intimate. The next day, Lorraine complained about the lack of money and difficulties paying rent. She received two $50 bills from him. However, she soon discovered that the money was fake, and in anger called Kibby. She told him that she had informed the police where she got the bills, and that he should expect a visit from law enforcement. This call was a turning point in Abby's fate. On July 20th, the kidnapper suddenly gave her all her personal belongings, tied her hands, put her in the front passenger seat of his car, and put a mask on her face. Abby did not understand what was happening and feared that she was being taken to be killed. But Nate stopped on a country road, untied her and said, "Get out and don't you dare go back to the police," after which he started the car and quickly drove away. Abby could not believe that this was really happening. She just walked along the road until she saw signs and realized that her home was very close. The girl walked this distance in a couple of hours, constantly looking around and fearing that the kidnapper would return, but he was nowhere to be seen. The Hernandez family had a surveillance camera on the porch of the house, which recorded the moment Abby walked through the door. She heard her mother talking on the phone and called out to her loudly. The shocked woman dropped her cell phone and rushed to the threshold. Mother and daughter hugged, crying for a long time, not believing that this nightmare was finally over and they were together again. Abby noticed how much her mother had changed. She had aged and withered greatly over these months. Xenia began to ask her daughter where she had been all this time and what had happened to her. She suggested going to the police right away. However, Abby, remembering the kidnapper's threats, decided not to give him away. She said that she did not know who had kidnapped her or where she had been kept. She also did not tell the police his name, fearing that Nate might come after her or her loved ones. The girl spent the next week in confusion, not knowing what to do. In the end, she decided to tell the truth to her mother. Xenia convinced her to go to the police again, explaining that the criminal must be punished for his actions. In addition, neither Abby nor her family could feel safe while Kibby remained at large. On July 27, 2014, Abby named the kidnapper, as well as the make and number of his car. The man was arrested the very next day. To everyone's surprise, he did not resist, although he completely denied his guilt. However, in his trailer, as well as in the container, which was finally inspected, a lot of evidence was found indicating that it was there that Abby had been kept for a long time, being subjected to and cruel abuse. Hair, traces of blood, sweat and fat traces, as well as the victim's broken nails were found. Despite the fact that Kibby's guilt seemed obvious, his lawyer filed an appeal for release on bail as early as August. The judge granted this appeal, which caused massive outrage and shock among the public. However, that same day, a warrant was issued prohibiting Kibby from approaching the Hernandez family and trying to contact them in any way. The trial of Nathaniel Kibby began in December 2014 and lasted until May 2016. The defendant, trying to mitigate the sentence, agreed to a plea deal and pleaded guilty. For his crimes, he was sentenced to 90 years in prison with the possibility of early release no earlier than 45 years. Abby spoke in court with a speech in which she said that she forgave her kidnapper. Thanks to this terrible experience, she learned to value life more and every minute spent with loved ones. Her mother also spoke, saying that she hated Kibby with all her soul, but at the same time was grateful to him for saving her daughter's life and allowing her to return home. This story shows how Abigail's incredible courage and her mother's support helped to achieve justice and punish the kidnapper. Despite the horror she experienced, Abby was able to forgive her tormentor and find a new understanding of the value of life. The complex trial ended with a well-deserved sentence, allowing the Hernandez family to finally feel safe. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.